maritime governance. In 2017, the idea to establish the multinational cooperation framework among the archipelagic and island states was first iterated during the UN Ocean Conference in New York. In November 2018, Indonesia hosted the first ministerial meeting with 21 archipelagic and island states. The Archipelagic and Island States Forum was established by Manando Joint Declaration. In the following year, the second ministerial meeting adopted the final outcome with 25 AIS participating countries. To achieve our vision, we focus on 4 objectives which we translate into our programs. Create an open, innovative, and engaging forum. Provide a space to share and implement innovative and tangible programs. Promote collaborative efforts among stakeholders. And create opportunity through the blue economy. Ideation, implementation, and evaluation are the core elements to our solution framework in addressing the problems. In 2020, AIS Forum launched programs to drive innovation, which are AIS Joint Research, a collaborative applied research program affiliated with academic institutions in AIS countries with various topics related to the 4 areas of collaboration. The Innovator Scholarship Program, a fully funded exchange program for talented individuals from AIS participating countries who can demonstrate exceptional leadership quality and creative mind, and AIS Innovation Challenge, to find innovative ideas and breakthroughs that can help societies and businesses to be more resilient and adaptive during crisis situations. AIS Forum also launched AIS Blue Startup Hub, a platform to connect marine-focused startup in 47 archipelagic and island states across the globe. AIS Blue Startup Hub Mentoring Program was launched with 18 participating startups from 6 countries. As an effort to realize the smart, innovative solutions, AIS Forum also engaged with public audiences through online events in a form of trainings, workshops, talk shows, and discussions with various topics and stakeholders across AIS participating countries. In light of COVID-19 pandemic, it is important for archipelagic and island states to have a resilient economy. Therefore, AIS Forum Secretariat introduces programs which focuses on blue economy. As a form of its commitment, AIS Forum developed Blue Economy Development Index, or BEDI. This index will be used as a tracking tool to determine the current use of coastal and marine resources, and it can be used as a tool to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. Blue Financing Framework, or BFF, which provides a guidance for governments, financial institutions, philanthropists, and donors to align their investments with the blue economy principles and allow them to select a project to be financed in the blue economy sectors. Smart and innovative solution programs, such as sharing knowledge sessions with experts and representatives from AIS participating countries. Plankton, which was a competition to raise awareness in reducing marine plastic debris. Impact pitching, which connects startups, small and medium-sized enterprises, potential investors, and growth enablers to gain partnership. And Ending Plastic Pollution Innovation Challenge, which was a collaboration with Marine Plastic Debris Project from UNDP Indonesia to address marine plastic pollution in Southeast Asia. Many solutions to challenges that affect AIS participating countries in 4 main thematic areas and SDG 14 goals are produced through collaboration programs. These programs will explore opportunities through innovation and experiment that benefits on a local, regional, and international scale through sharing knowledge and experiences between AIS participating countries.
So thank you for this insightful video clip about the work, very valid work conducted by the AIS Forum. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending obviously on your time zone. I'll be moderating this very interesting webinar by the AIS Forum, which is being organized to commemorate the World Maritime Day, which is being, in fact, celebrated today, which is the 30th September. I am Professor Alan Deidun from a archipelagic state, the Maltese Islands, within the Mediterranean in Europe. So obviously this is a thematic which is very much at our heart. I have to thank the AIS Forum Secretariat for inviting me to moderate this session. And before I obviously introduce the speakers, I wish to acknowledge some of our distinguished contributors. His Excellency Arif Havas Agroceano, who is the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the Federal Republic of Germany. I also acknowledge the presence of Mr. Basilio Araujo, Deputy Minister for Maritime Sovereignty and Energy, Coordinating Ministry of Maritime Affairs. Professor Ronan Long, Professor of Maritime Law, Policy and Governance from the World Maritime University. Julia Kircher, who is a senior expert at the Oslo Governance Center, UNDP. And I obviously welcome all participants joining in from the representative embassies in Jakarta, the Archipelagic and Island States Country Network, the academic community, civil society, and all stakeholder groups. I am informed that this online event, this webinar, has been very well received and is being followed, in fact, quite extensively online. I now invite Deputy Minister for Indonesia for Maritime Sovereignty and Energy, Mr. Basilio Araujo, to deliver his welcoming and opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning for friends who are in Europe and other parts of the world. Good afternoon, good evening for those who are in Asia. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin by saying it is an honor for me to address this distinguished gathering, and I wish to thank the Archipelagic and Island States Forum Secretariat for hosting this important discussion on connecting maritime governance with the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. I understand that we have participants here today from across the network of archipelagic and island states. So let me begin by extending my warmest welcome and thanking you for investing your time in attending this event. So before proceeding, let me first acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Arif Havas Agroceano, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the Federal Republic of Germany, who used to be my boss actually, Ambassador, Professor Ronan Long, Professor of Maritime Law, Policy and Governance, World Maritime University, Julia Kircher, Senior Expert, Oslo Governance Center, UNDP, Professor Alan Deidun, Ambassador for Ocean Governance and Director of the International Ocean Institute, University of Malta. It is a great pleasure to welcome everyone joining us today in recognition of World Maritime Day. There is no better time than now to achieve this discussion in this decade, which is so critical for achieving the 2030 SDGs agenda, and especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic recovery efforts. During the discussions, we will hear from an international panel of experts on maritime governance and sustainable development. We will also listen to perspectives of professionals, seafarers, and the locals who benefit from the critical services that these workers provide. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, the oceans cover 3/4 of the Earth's surface, providing critical communication and commerce corridors. Can we all imagine a world which there are no regulations on who can fish where, which routes ships may sail, or where resources exploration is permitted? Without rules and regulations, the global maritime order would face the same rivalries and instability as faced within the oceans in their natural and civilized state. Equity and sustainability must continue to be core principles in ocean governance. The issues that arise within this sector are shared internationally. Climate change, population pressures, economic globalization, and unsustainable exploitation of marine resources challenge our ability to cooperate nationally, regionally, and internationally. These issues cannot be resolved by nations acting alone, because no such of the ocean is beyond the legal jurisdiction of any single state. Furthermore, one branch of scientific inquiry or technology alone cannot provide us with comprehensive solutions. Only through interdisciplinary exchanges can we hope to comprehend the complex relationships the ocean represents. Only through negotiation and compromise amongst nations can there be a possibility of effective action. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, we observe World Maritime Day in light of the great contribution of maritime activities to the development of archipelagic and island states. Maritime activity dates back thousands of years and goes hand in hand with the development of island societies. As a result, islanders have generally played an important role in developing knowledge of the seas and in advancing innovation and technology that facilitates maritime activity. The oceans of archipelagic and island states constitute a much larger geographic area than their inland territory. As custodians of vast areas of the world's ocean, archipelagic and island states have an important role to play in global maritime governance mechanism. These geographic circumstances create unique opportunities and challenges for maritime governance that mainland countries do not experience. We will hear today of the opportunities arising within good maritime governance for various areas of sustainable development. Developing and implementing the security systems, standards, and procedures that comply with international maritime codes not only helps to protect maritime activities, but also ensures that they are not conducted at the expense of the environment. The Sustainable Development Agenda is a people-centered one. Citizens and communications of island states, therefore, must be at the heart of any maritime governance framework. These mechanisms are valuable to the extent that they work to protect individuals from the seafarers operating the vessels and navigating the seas to the people living in coastal communities whose lives and well-beings are intertwined with that of the oceans and coasts. For this reason, we will also hear from people working on the ground in the maritime sector. Due to the transboundary nature of maritime governance, these challenges and opportunities are best navigated through international collaborations, and transparency. The ICE Forum is particularly instrumental to bringing together the key stakeholders from different archipelagic and island states to share best practices and find common solutions to shared challenges. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I firmly believe this discussion will be an excellent opportunity to explore this highly relevant topic further. We are fortunate to have with us leading experts on the subject. I am confident that the new insights and knowledge conveyed to our audience will help us to deepen our collective understanding about innovative approaches to maritime governance, while providing a basis of concerted actions to be undertaken by all stakeholders. I will close these words. The challenges ahead may loom large, but through continued engagement, commitment, and perseverance, we can open access to every waterway and unlock the many benefits that flow along with it. To our seafarers, happy World Maritime Day. Thank you. Back to you, Alan.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, for those wise words and for obviously setting the context to this meeting through your very relevant, comments. Thank you for that. Before obviously introducing our first speaker for today, in acknowledgement of the, I wish to give acknowledgement as well to the role played by the Republic of Indonesia, in establishing the AIS Forum in 2017, also by mentioning that on the margins of the upcoming UNFCCC COP26 in Glasgow, which will happen this November, there will be two important meetings organized by the AIS Forum in collaboration, obviously, jointly by the Republic of Indonesia and the UNDP on the margins of this COP meeting, two very important meetings for the forum. And in fact, the Republic of Malta was kindly invited by the Republic of Indonesia through its embassy in Rome as well to participate in these meetings. And another important, obviously relevant point here to mention is that the International Small Island States Association, ISISA, which is led by Professor Godfrey Baldacchino, a colleague of mine at the University of Malta, is aiming as well to organize its biennial conference in Indonesia in 2024. This is all in acknowledgement, obviously, of the pivotal and crucial role played by the Republic of Indonesia when it comes to archipelagic, island states. I think this is very, very important. We now pass on to the next stage of our program for today, and I wish to introduce His Excellency Mr. Arif Havas Ebroseno, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the Federal Republic of Germany, who will be our first speaker. Ambassador Ebroseno is Ambassador Plenipotentiary and Extraordinary of the Republic of Indonesia to the Federal Republic of Germany, sworn in by the President of the Republic of Indonesia, the 20th February 2018. Prior to this, he held the office of Vice Minister for Maritime Sovereignty at the Coordinating Ministry for Maritime Affairs from 2015 to 2018, after serving as Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the Kingdom of Belgium, Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, and the European Union from 10th August 2010 to January 2015. His previous task included that of Director General for Law and International Agreements from 2008 to 2010. This position represented a promotion from the previous position of Director for Political Security and Regional Agreements, Director General for Law and International Agreements from 2002 to 2008. June 2008, he became the first Indonesian to preside over the 20th Conference on the Convention on Maritime Law of 1982, UNCLOS, what we call UNCLOS, at the UN headquarters in New York. And the president of this conference presides over 160 member states of the same convention. His career as a diplomat and civil servant stretches over 32 years, since 1987, obviously culminating presently within his rank of Ambassador Plenipotentiary. His overseas posting as a diplomat included the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia, Lisbon, Portugal, and as well the permanent mission, with the main task to reopen the permanent mission of the Republic of Indonesia in Geneva with focus on human rights. And Ambassador is also an alumnus of the Harvard Law School, 1992, and the Faculty of Law in Universitas Dupenogro, 1986. And besides participating in various career courses for civil servants and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, he also took part in a number of short training courses abroad, amongst others those organized by the World Bank and Harvard Institute on International Development. And last but not least, he was awarded the Honorary Medal of the Commander in the Order of Leopold of Belgium from the King of Belgium, as well as the Honorary Medal by two cities of Belgium, You know, we really have a distinguished guest who is very well poised to give us his insights as the first speaker within this event. Ambassador, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Alan Deydun, for the kind words, and thank you for the invitations to speak at this very important discussions. Thanks to Deputy Basilio Araujo, and I also would like to send my regards to other distinguished speaker, Madam Kersher, Ronan, Professor Ronan Long, a good friend, also Pak Uco here, Abdul Situmorang from Jakarta, and also a colleague, I think, from ISA, and also from Trinidad and Tobago, who will speak later on. So I will discuss about my own assessment on the architecture of global maritime governance today. And from there, I would like to try to see where the latest development on the SDG achievements, both at our national level and also hopefully at the Asia Pacific level, as well as the level of the Archipelagic and island states. And I will close by giving some food for thought, how we move forward, in these discussions. So I draw this. I think can the organizer allow me to share screen? Because somehow I could not share the screen here. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Can you see this drawing?
Yes.
All right. So I did it myself. So I hope you like it. So this is the architecture of our ocean governance today, as I see it. Right. You see, we are actually fractured when we talk about the navigations. Then we go to IMO, right? That would be the use of the surface of the oceans, maybe some part of the ocean for the submarines. But if you want to talk about fisheries, we go to ROW, we go to FAO. I'm not so sure whether IMO and FAO talks to each other, okay, on vessels that conduct illegal fishing, for instance. And if you want to do a little bit of a much scientific discussion, then you go to IOC in Paris, okay. And if you want to talk about hydrography, then you go to IHO. That would be in Monaco. So IMO and IHO, they speak. I understand. I went to the meeting of IHO a couple of times, but not necessarily with FAO or IOC. And if you are talking about the implementation of law of the sea, then that would be the state parties meeting in New York, run by us state parties and held by UN Dwalos. Okay. And if you want to do explorations in the area, in the continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles, then you go to Jamaica, to the ISA. Okay. You want to see micrology there. And if you want to talk about the environment, then you go to Nairobi, you talk to UNEP. So Professor Ronan mentioned that you are going to have the conference in Malmo at WMU on the issue of marine plastic debris. Then UNEP is a place, but if the debris comes from the vessel, then probably IMO will talk about it. But if the debris relates to fishing gears, FAO probably has to say something about it. But So far, there is not a single body where we can actually sit down to talk about this comprehensively. Last but not least, this is an organization that not normally associated with fishery, which is WTO, but it's specifically mentioned in SDG 14 that we have to end fishery subsidies that create illegal fishing and overfishing. And by the standards of the achievement and target of SDG, I think with all humility, we have to say that WTO has failed. Okay. And in Hamburg, you have ITLOS. Of course, it's independent, it's judged, but this relates to the use of the ocean. So this is the situation today. And that little ship over there, there's a case where I want to share with you a case study. So you have illegal fishing vessels that go across different territory, go across different sovereign rights, go across different EEZ, go across different ocean and seas. They are these vessels. They are stealing or fish, or they are doing illegal fishing. Okay, and they are also employing traffic persons or enslavement. So in one vessel there is slavery, and maybe there are kids there being enslaved, and they are doing illegal fishing. So who is going to take care of that? The FAO says, well, this is crime, this is TOC, so you go to Vienna, UNODC. UNODC says, yes, we have some mechanism on TOC, but not on fishery. Why don't you check Interpol? Interpol said, no, I don't have that mandate. Check the IMO. The IMO says, yeah, but we are not taking care of fishing vessels. We are taking care of the containers and stuff. We have some rules on fisheries, but not exactly an element that we can enforce in terms of how you are going to implement the illegal fishing measures. So this is the conditions that we face today. Okay, the global architecture of maritime governance are fractured. Yes, you have an annual report by the Secretary Generals, normally provided to us member states in New York at the end of the year when we have a meeting. The report is quite thick, but it was just a report on what we are basically doing, but not necessarily on how we can tackle the different issue of maritime, and especially relates to SDG together. Now, if we try to do some benchmarking, for instance, when we talk about SDG 14, life underwater, okay, it says marine pollution it has to be reduced or even ended in 2025. I'm not so sure we are successful, okay, on this particular issue, because marine pollution that comes from land, it's not being addressed at all, and that is not even in any international UN body that deals with that. Sustainable way in managing coastal marine ecosystems. The target is 2020. We understand completely that in Paris Agreement, there is no ocean in it. It's only recently that we talk about ocean issue in the terms of COP, and therefore issue of rising sea level that affect many countries, including a large archipelagic state like Indonesia. It's not addressed comprehensively. IUU fishing, it is supposed to be reduced by 2020. I think it's failed. We have to say that. The overfishing in the Indian Ocean is going on. the issue of overfishing in different parts of the world is still going on. Conserving 10% of MPA for MPA by the 2020, we only achieved 7.74% today. Failed. Fisheries subsidies in WTO failed. I'm sorry, I'm bringing you bad news. Yeah. So it's not really a very nice picture in the world. And if you look at SDG 16, the issue of reductions of all form of violence in relations to ocean issue, slavery in fisheries, crime in fisheries still goes on. In the COVID area, in the COVID situations, we also face a very specific problem. We actually, Indonesia, we had a problem, but we managed to do it when we have our crews in the vessels of tourism vessels that was stuck in European waters. We work with them. Some companies are cooperative. I would say my partners in Germany are all cooperatives, but in other countries are not so cooperative. So again, a violation of human rights of crews in terms of the pandemic is something that we need to look at also in the future. So I would say that the SDG 14 and SDG 16, in the context of our achievements, we have, of course, some individual countries' achievements. A couple of countries have achieved quite a large portion, for instance, Indonesia, in terms of the MPA. But I'm looking at the whole picture of archipelagic and island states, and that is unfortunately not yet there. So what next? I think I just want to bring this through our mind together. What next? Number one, Professor Dayton mentioned rightly about the next COP, COP26. So I would imagine that the ICE countries could organize some common positions, okay, in relations to climate and oceans. There are already some discussion, of course, going on in UNFCCC. I went for the meeting on the ocean issue under the UNFCCC context. It's very good because it was non-existent in the past, but now you have it. I think we need to strengthen this. That's the one, common positioning in COP. And on the issue of, for instance, some achievement of SDGs and 14 and 16, probably what we can do is to have a listing or repository of what the ICE countries have done, so that we have the records. It's some sort of a reporting, but not, I don't want to use reporting that will create another problems. Country normally don't want to give a report to organizations, but at least a voluntary information provided by ICE on how far you have actually achieved SDG 14 and 16, and how far we can make it better, how far we can see what is not being done, how we can work together in trying to create a better outcome of the SDG 14 and 16 based on these current situations of maritime governance. So number three, I would probably based on that an even more exchange of experience by the larger archipelagic or ICE state, or by the smaller but they have successful programs, is something that also can be done in that particular issue. Number four, WTO. WTO is the weakest point in terms of illegal fishing. The FAO has a guidelines on illegal fishing. UNDP has tried very strongly, to get things done in terms of TOC. Interpol has tried to do something. IMO has tried to also put some fishing vessels under or over certain tonnage to be, sort of regulated clearly, at least monitored by others. But WTO, I would say, is a failure. Then WTO, some bigger countries are using the concern of smaller countries. The concern of smaller countries is that fishery subsidies are given to them for the coastal artisanal fisheries, which makes sense. But the long distance fisheries nations, they ask for subsidies to buy for the fuels, for the diesels, for a different incentive, so that these big vessels can go across the ocean and do all kind of damages to the ocean. So I think the ICE common position in WTO, is a very important aspect in trying to bring the attentions in Geneva on this particular issue of ocean governance and illegal fishing. So I think I will close there. Okay. And I hope this will just give you like an appetizer to give you some initial thinking on how we could move forward with this condition. The condition that global ocean governance are fractured, some working fine, some are not. Some cases have shown that the existing governance is not able to address the issue at all. And there is a need also to have a common positions much more stronger for the next COP and also in WTO, and also for ourselves, which is to learn from each other how far we have gone, each of us, in terms of implementation of SDG 14 and 16. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Graciano. I must say that as an academic, I too found your intervention really interesting and enlightening, and I myself learned stuff. So thank you very much for your insight, and for literally putting your finger on the problems, and going straight to the point, as the Americans say, cutting to the chase. So I think that was very useful context. We now pass on to our next speaker, Ms. Julia Kircher, Dr. Julia Kircher, who is a lawyer and development practitioner, and who has worked for different UN agencies as well as civil society organizations over the past 20 years. She is also an alumnus of the Rhodes Academy of Oceans Law and Policy 2021. She was closely involved in the drafting of the SDGs, especially of SDG 16 on peace, justice, and inclusion. She has conducted research on the state of different SDGs in the maritime sector, and currently works for UNDP's Oslo Governance Center, where she advises a UNDP project on organized crime in fisheries. Julia, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. And just to make one small correction, and thanking you for awarding me a PhD within seconds. I don't have one. Many other degrees, but not a PhD. But everything else was correct. Thank you so much. First of all, many thanks to AIS, the AIS Forum, and the government of Indonesia for holding this important event on today's World Maritime Day. It's a true honor to be here. And I'd like to start by recognizing the theme of World Maritime Day today again, by giving a big salute to seafarers out there. Seafarers ship about 90% of goods, of everything that we use around the globe every day. And they do so under conditions like COVID-19 now, where many of them have been stuck on boats, not being able to go home for months on end. But even without a pandemic around the world, I've done a fair bit of research on the role and the situation of seafarers in the past few years, and it's incredible to see under which precarious working conditions seafarers work these days, nowadays. Sometimes one thinks perhaps worse than before. Women are very little represented, make up only 1 to 2% in the maritime sector. And seafarers are almost invisible. We receive our packages and everything that we order and buy, and we don't know who's working for this. So that's just a big salute to seafarers on this day. To start us off, I'll share my screen for my presentation. Is this visible? I hope so. Great. I think my remarks are going to fit fairly well with the ambassadors. It was fascinating to hear your remarks. So I'll talk about good maritime governance and the SDGs. First, conceptually a little bit, then I'll go into an example on fisheries crime, as the ambassador mentioned, a typical and rampant issue of maritime governance these days. And I'll mention a project that I currently advise at UNDP. Good maritime governance and the SDGs. I was in preparation for the meeting and in discussions with the forum, I was reflecting on the term of good maritime governance, and it was very interesting to see how the ambassador filled it with his practical experience. And then I realized that actually I feel I can unpack maritime governance through the SDGs. So I suggest we start with the SDGs and see what they help us, how they help us understand good maritime governance. So here's the SDGs, as we all know them, all goals nicely lined up, 17 of them. But then there are others who see the goals slightly differently, more packaged, along, for example, the 5 Ps that the 2030 agenda mentions as well. There are planetary goals that focus mostly on environmental issues, one can argue. There are people's goals that focus on social issues. There are prosperity goals that focus mostly on economic issues. And then there are goal 16 on governance or peace, and 17 on partnership that kind of hold all these other goals and all these other dimensions together. They're like a backbone, one can say, or an enabler to fulfill and to achieve all the other goals. So that's one way of seeing it. And if we zoom in even more, this is from a report that we coordinated at UNDP a few years ago. You can even say that peace, justice, and inclusion, SDG 16, is an enabler or interlinked with the other 3 dimensions in this way. So this just shows it a little bit more specifically. And in this, I can place good maritime governance, I think. So if we say that good maritime governance basically is included in SDG 16, and SDG 16 covers many issues of good maritime governance, then we can say that good maritime governance is absolutely critical for everything that happens in, on, and around the ocean, and on all levels, as the ambassador mentioned, at the national, regional, and global. So on the environment side, we could say good maritime governance is needed for ocean health, and that is reflected in SDG 14. But the effects of ocean health go even beyond that. So the effects on the climate, for example, goal 13. Good maritime governance is also absolutely critical for seafarers' well-being, as we've seen, and as the ambassador has also already mentioned, working conditions, the health and the well-being, mental health and physical health of seafarers, gender equality, discrimination, all those issues. And we need good maritime governance for that. And then we have the blue economy, so the economic side. Good maritime governance is also critical for economic growth, for a healthy blue economy, and also for responsible consumption and production. So in that sense, the SDGs already help us unpack what good maritime governance means. And SDG 16 therefore includes, in my view, good maritime governance and shows how critical it is for the ocean, for ocean health, seafarers' well-being, and the blue economy. Now, what are the aspects of good maritime governance and SDG 16 in that sense? What does SDG 16 include? I'll move on to an example now. One major issue of good maritime governance today in today's world, which is organized crime in the fisheries sector, already also mentioned by the ambassador. What does that include? Broadly speaking, this is a graph from a blue paper of the Ocean Panel. Fraud, corruption, tax crime, money laundering, labor market offenses. We've all mentioned this already today. So that's what we refer to as organized crime in the fisheries sector. Those are obviously all issues that stem from failure or weaknesses in maritime governance, again, at national, regional, or global level. So what I'll show you now is a tool that we've developed that shows how we can use the SDGs to unpack some of these issues and address them. So I'll walk you through this. You see at the top, I've entered the issue that I chose to illustrate this. Basically slave-like conditions in remote vessels in the fisheries sector. So if we take that as an issue, we can go through the SDG 16 targets and see what key elements are, what key issues are at stake and are problematic in this situation, and how they affect economic, social, and environmental goals as well. So, for example, there's SDG 16 targets on violence, even violence against children, abuse, exploitation, and as the ambassador mentioned, on such vessels, you even find underage workers. So this is, in that case, children. There's the rule of law and access to justice, target 3 of SDG 16, illicit financial flows, arms flows, all issues that are part of fisheries crime. There are vessels that smuggle arms, that are used to launder money. Corruption and bribery, very common. So in this tool, what you can do is basically you can see how these issues are relevant and how these issues and addressing these issues would help solve the issue or advance in reducing, in this case, slavery-like conditions on vessels, and how they in turn also affect negatively or ideally positively economic, social, and environmental goals. So, for example, if you improve rule of law and the access to justice, this can have immediate social effects for workers that can, for example, are not being paid on such vessels and can claim their salaries, just to give you an example of a social impact. So this is just a brief matrix to show how the SDG framework, even though it's of course much broader than maritime issues, can be used to systematically look at maritime governance issues and how they affect economic, social, and environmental issues. I'll now want to almost conclude already by speaking briefly about UNDP's Blue Resilience Project, which is basically an illustration of what I just spoke about. It's a project that seeks to support effective governance responses to address fisheries crime. So exactly squarely a maritime governance project, if you want. And the focus is on better institutional cooperation. One of the first things we did in the project was to conduct research on governance impediments in the sector, in the fisheries sector. And one thing we found is that institutional cooperation is often lacking between different institutions, let's say the fishing authority and agencies, government agencies, such as the tax authority or the immigration office, who all hold key pieces of information that need to be brought together. And there are reasons why this cooperation is not happening. And in the cases that we looked at, we spoke to people in 16 countries. Some of the success factors we found, you see here in this diagram, this iceberg diagram. Some are quite obvious, like additional resources, institutionalization of cooperation among agencies. But then there are other issues that are more under the surface, that are not so much discussed, but that seem to really drive a lack of cooperation between government agencies, such as incentives. Why should I work with another agency? What's in there for me in terms of career progression? Or trust and ownership issues. Do institutions trust each other? Is there enough transparency? And so on. So some of these issues came out of our research, and they're now informing something we're developing, which we call a learning journey, which will be a learning experience for national partners that they can take to better understand the governance impediments to fighting fisheries crime in their countries. Alongside the project, we have a secure digital online platform, the Blue Justice Community, which helps governments among themselves, but also across countries, to communicate also confidential information with each other to support and facilitate this institutional cooperation. Finally, to say that the Blue Resilience Project in UNDP is a part of a wider initiative, the Blue Justice Initiative, that was initiated and is funded by Norway. And Indonesia, for example, is part of the Copenhagen Declaration that kickstarted the initiative in 2018. The Copenhagen Declaration focuses on precisely interagency cooperation between government agencies to address fisheries crime. It explicitly aims to contribute to the SDGs, 14, 16, but also the others that I mentioned. And it's supported by an increasing number of countries, currently 39, but next week we might already be at more because a number of Caribbean countries are signing up. I think I want to conclude with this and come back to what the ambassador said. This initiative itself, I think, is an example of an effort to bring together countries and link in with institutions, UN institutions and others. Even in this project, for example, in the Blue Resilience Project, we work with other UN agencies, with Interpol and so on, to address the issues more effectively. So the existence of this Blue Initiative is precisely, I think, an evidence to what the ambassador has said about the fragmentation of efforts and or of initiatives, and the keen interest by many countries to work more systematically together on good maritime governance. So with this, I thank you, and I hand back over to the professor. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. As well, I can say, and I probably reflect the spirit of all the participants following this webinar, that once again this presentation follows on the footsteps of the first one in terms of quality, you know, and really by going giving us the lowdown on the issue. So we've heard from the ambassador, so from the diplomatic front, we've heard from Julia, obviously from a practitioner and even civil society point of view. I think now we can complement these two presentations with the third presentation, which is by Professor Long, which I would say comes mainly from the academic point of view, not only, but Professor Long is obviously a primarily an academic, and in fact he's director of the WMU Sasakawa Global Ocean Institute, and lectures on a broad range of ocean governance subjects. including the law of the sea, the law of climate change, as well as on multilateral diplomacy and dispute resolution. Previous appointments held by Professor Long include a personal professorship and the Jean Monnet Chair of European Law at the National University of Ireland, Galway. He was also a visiting scholar at the Center for Oceans Law and Policy, University of Virginia School of Law, and a senior distinguished scholar in residence, Law of the Sea Institute, Berkeley Law, University of California. Faculty at the Rhodes Academy Oceans Law and Policy, as well as the United Nations Nippon Foundation of Japan Fellowship Program. In the latter capacity, he has co-supervised mid-career legal professionals from Bangladesh, Mozambique, Myanmar, Guatemala, Sierra Leone, Costa Rica, Namibia, and Nigeria. He has a long-standing working relationship with the Korean Maritime Institute, including faculty membership of the also Academy of the Law of the Sea. Prior to his academic career, to his prestigious academic career, Professor Long was a permanent staff member at the European Commission, where he undertook over 40 missions on behalf of European institutions to member states, as well as to the US, Canada, Central America, and to a number of African countries, where his responsibilities included representing the European Commission, the European Council working groups, and at several international fora, as well as drafting European regulations governing new satellite technologies for vessel monitoring systems. He has recently, and this is of interest to me because he has recently also participated in the MERSIS project, and I had the pleasure of evaluating for the EU Commission the final stages of this very interesting project, the MERSIS project. Basically, MERSIS project deals with ecosystem restoration. So within the MERSIS project, a lot has been achieved throughout European waters with the restoration of seagrass beds, for example, for reefs and the coralligenous, and even mussel beds and so on and so forth. He's also a member of the Atlas Consortium, and the Atlas is a pan-Atlantic project which is funded by the EU through an interesting instrument, through the Galway statement, which basically pulls together European and North American and also South American and African partners to try to obviously do research and manage the Atlantic as a whole, not just traditionally the North Atlantic, but also the less known South Atlantic. Professor Long, it's a pleasure obviously to have you here with us, and floor is yours. Thank you.
Alan, thank you very much. And Ambassador, just wonderful to see you this morning. Deputy Minister, really nice to see you joining us this afternoon from Indonesia. And Julia, I was very much struck by your presentations. And of course, first and foremost, I'd like to wish everybody on the webinar today, or this evening, or this morning, Happy World Maritime Day. It's very central to the mission of the university. And in particular, we would like to acknowledge the support from Indonesia to the work of the university. And that has been a very long-standing relationship. So it's been very important for us. If I can share my screen, and I'm going to pick up some of the themes raised by the Ambassador and indeed by Julia in their presentations. I'm going to talk about maritime governance in the era of climate change. And I would say we talk now about climate emergency, and it's human-induced climate emergency. And I've put the COVID-19 pandemic into the equation in the title. And to start out, I think I have a premise which really works on what we've heard in the Ambassador's presentation and indeed in Julie's presentation there. Firstly, the environmental, economic, and political dimensions pertaining to the oceans are continuously changing over time. They are dynamic. I think they are most acute in relation to human-induced climate change, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, law on maritime governance must continuously evolve in response to these changes. Thirdly, and I know this is highly contentious, is that Community interests are best served by strong and responsive international organizations and by partnerships founded on the principle of intergovernmental cooperation. And I think that was very evident in both presentations so far. And fourthly, and I suppose this goes directly to the forum, archipelagic and island states have a key role to play in the protection of community interests because they concern the living conditions of present and future generations. And Ambassador Habas has been here at the university to lead a number of very important workshops and conferences, one on climate change and oceans, and one on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. And so he's well versed not only in terms of the real politique of the diplomatic world, but also the work that's being done in academic institutions such as the World Maritime University. I would also argue, right, that archipelagic and small island states are most vulnerable to environmental risk, whether the risk is human-induced climate change or indeed the COVID-19 pandemic, for a number of reasons. They're not inclusive or exclusive. Firstly, I think the impacts are most severe. There's the lower capacity to adapt. They exacerbate inequalities that already exist in small island states. They threaten food security, and we've made reference to that already in Julia's presentation. There's the issue of forced migration, of course. Then there's the conflicts, the policy objectives, particularly in terms of implementing the 2030 agenda and the 17 goals. And invariably, it's about resources and budgets. I have two brief quotations for you from the Global Risks Report, which is published by the World Economic Forum every year. And in the 2019 report, which was published prior to the pandemic, they said, global risks are intensifying, but the collective will to tackle them appears to be lacking. Instead, divisions are hardening. And then, of course, more recently, this year's report said developed and developing countries with weak public finances face a harder road to recovery. So that sets the political context. And I think it's crucially important that this forum and indeed the work of the webinar is focused on the tremendous contribution of the world maritime community, and in particular to seafarers, to serve the global supply chain throughout the pandemic. And what I would say is that we can highlight, certainly here in the university, a report done by my colleagues, published in 2021 in relation to an evaluation of the implementation of current maritime regulatory framework on rest and work hours in the maritime sector, and particularly in relation to seafarers. And this report is drawn from interviews done with seafarers, as well as with regulators, flag states, and seafarer organizations. And the findings are pretty sober. Firstly, that there's an ingrained culture of underreporting and falsification of seafarers' hours of work, rest, which implicates the entire industry, from flag states and ship owners to seafarers on board. A 14-hour working day has become standardized for some seafarers in direct contravention to the IMO or the ILO Maritime Labour Convention. And this research exposes a culture of fatigue and downward commercial pressure on seafarers and safe crewing levels. It also, the findings point that the coronavirus pandemic has intensified the crisis relating to seafarers' working conditions, and this requires stronger regulatory enforcement responses in domestic and international level. I'm very pleased, right, to say that small island states and archipelagic states in particular, 6 of whom were to the fore in sponsoring a very important UNGA resolution on international cooperation, because I think that's the leitmotif of this forum today. And that UNGA resolution, apart from expressing gratitude to the contribution of seafarers as frontline workers, also calls for a mobilized, coordinated global response, as well as member states to designate seafarers and other marine personnel as key workers. It encourages governments and relevant stakeholders to implement the protocols to ensure safe ship crew changes and travel during the COVID-19 pandemic, including repatriation. And it calls upon governments to promptly implement relevant measures designed to facilitate crew changes. It goes on to talk about the integrity and the need to increase the resilience of global supply chains, decent working and living condition and human rights of seafarers. And of course, it requested the Secretary General of the United Nations to report on crew changes situation and the UNDP review of maritime transport. So it's very evident, right, that archipelagic and small island states are active at a global, at the multilateral level to ensure a far greater coordinated response to one of the biggest crises of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think it's incumbent not on all of us participating in the webinar this day, but everybody else in the global community across the world to acknowledge the contribution of seafarers. I think it was very evident from what the ambassador certainly said in kicking the session off is the pressures in the ocean environment and indeed the pressures on maritime governance are exacerbated by a whole range of other challenges. So there's a multiplier effect, and you know that goes to IUU fishing, it goes to carbon intensive economies, it goes to the issue of loss of cruise tourism in small island developing states in the Caribbean in particular, and it goes to, of course, the human tragedy of migration. And this, as we see, can't be sustained by the ecological or the socio-ecological system that we have on planet Earth. Quite clearly, the rule of law is paramount. And I would have to say that international bodies and intergovernmental bodies have a key role to play, particularly, and I would point to our own parent organization in relation to their role in standard setting for safety, security, and environmental performance of international shipping. It does this by international treaties. And of course, within the Law of the Sea Convention itself, we have specific reference, rules of reference provisions, which means that parties to UNCLOS are compelled to implement rules adopted by competent international organizations or indeed diplomatic conferences to the extent that these rules are applicable or generally accepted. So international organizations such as the IMO can further elaborate upon the framework provisions in the Law of the Sea Convention. And of course, a crucial role of the IMO is their oversight and implementation responsibility carried out through the member state audit scheme and through technical cooperation. And of course, we ourselves here at the World Maritime University have done this for in excess of 37 years, as indeed has our sister institution, IMLI in Malta, since 1988. And we are proud of our alumni across the world. What's quite important now is the curriculum and indeed the research and the capacity of the university has changed. And we're now focusing on the broader ocean issues. So we look beyond maritime governance per se towards ocean governance. And we have a whole range of projects addressing marine debris, empowering women scientists for the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, land to ocean leadership, and a specific project funded by the European Union on robotics for hull surveying and cleaning. All of these projects are being delivered by students from the Global South. And I'm very proud to say the vast majority have come from small islands, developing states in the Caribbean and indeed elsewhere across the world. I would fully agree, right, that maybe the 2030 agenda is highly aspirational, but the good governance is very much contingent on each of the targets within the goals. And so we can't look at goal 14 in isolation. And I think Ambassador Havas, certainly, and Julie and myself speak with one voice on that. My final thoughts on this are maritime government's arrangements currently adequate to achieve sustainable development? Clearly, the answer is no. And I think one has to go no further than that wonderful painting by Ambassador Havas in his opening slide. I think the risks and threats, and this is very much evident throughout the pandemic, these are global risks, but the responses are national, and that's one big takeaway. Believe it or not, even in a highly integrated regional organizations such as the European Union, we had a national response to the pandemic. Likewise, I think the weaknesses of the sectoral approach are well documented. But aside from that, aside from what we're doing in ocean governance or indeed in maritime governance, I think we're lacking the linkages that are required, particularly to the climate change regime. It has almost evolved in a parallel universe, clearly on human rights instruments, and that was very evident, for example, in the report published by the university here on seafarers' rights and entitlements to rest. On the 2030 agenda, more generally, as well as on these building back better post-COVID-19 pandemic initiatives, as well as the 2030 biodiversity framework under the Convention on Biological Diversity. I was just so pleased this morning to hear from the ambassador that Indonesia and Malta and others are organizing on COP23 on climate and oceans issues. And I think the oceans community, the maritime community, has to become far more vocal outside of our siloed thinking. And we have collective responsibility on that. Just to pick up a point that you raised, Alan, perhaps in your very generous and elaborate introduction is, and this is a personal view, I think that the issue of ocean resilience, the issue of restoration, and we've got some great examples from Ambassador Havas about what Indonesia has done on mangrove restoration and how they have put their responses in place to the threat of tsunamis and other, working with nature. And I think that has to be very much the focus of international instruments, and particularly the draft BBNJ agreements. I've written on that. So, perhaps it's a discussion for another day. So I don't think we need to be talking about the current status. I think we should be very optimistic about future resilience, about building that resilience in the natural environment. And I think archipelagic and island states, through the work of the forum and indeed at various intergovernmental bodies, have just such a crucial role to play. Ambassador Havas has a very interesting paper on marine genetic resources in a book we've published with our colleagues on marine biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. It's freely available on the web. You don't have to look at all the papers in the book, but certainly look at that paper on marine genetic resources before the 4th session of the Intergovernmental Conference. And lastly, very close to our hearts here in the Institute and here in the university is to empower women. And in particular, we would like to acknowledge the support we've received from Canada and the Nippon Foundation for our Empowering Women program for the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And that again is freely available on the web. And I would urge everybody to download and please take a look at the findings in that report. I was asked at the beginning of the presentation, how are things in the university? And I'm very pleased to report that we're not exactly back to normal, but our students are all on board. Alan, I don't know how things are in Malta or indeed how things are in Indonesia, but certainly we're working towards those resilience issues and addressing these big multilateral challenges and indeed getting the international community to work together. And I think that's my key takeaway, and I would like to wish all the viewers happy World Maritime Day 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Long. If I may provide the insight from the University of Malta in terms of current status. Initially, the University of Malta was set to reopen its doors in a hybrid fashion for limited number of students who would be obviously on a rotating basis. But following an uproar from the students' associations themselves, the students actually were asking to be able, to be allowed to attend in total lectures, so the entire student complement. University had to revise its policy, and from last Monday we had the start of the current academic year with all students, attending regularly courses physically, so with all the precautions obviously in place, with masks and so on, students have to wear masks in class and so on, but it's almost business as usual, almost. So prior to presenting your delivery, I forgot to actually ask you to kindly pass on our regards to one of your colleagues, who's obviously also one of a regular contributor to our courses as well, who is Dr. Arif Fakhri, who is based at WMU and who's a regular contributor to the International Ocean Institute courses here in Malta. So please pass on our best regards to Arif, because it's been quite some time since we met him. So thank you once again to all three panelists. I think now it's quite how shall I say, legitimate to give the voice to those who are the real stakeholders in all of this, who are the real victims, I must say, to some of the crimes that are being perpetrated out at sea, so to seafarers and to those who we are celebrating today, World Maritime Day. So I kindly ask now the administrators to please launch the video clip, a 10-minute video clip, which I invite you all to watch carefully, A Seafarer's Tale, which includes examples from seafarers from Indonesia, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Ireland. And then once the clip is over, I'll invite the panelists as well back into the webinar to continue with proceedings. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Aprin Ambarita. I'm from Indonesia. I was work on MOL company, Japanese company, as a second officer of MOL LNG carrier. As a second officer, I prepared the passage plane as a following voyage instruction for our own ship under master confirmation. For the favorite things as a seafarer, especially for the ocean going, we have experience for the mixed nationality on board. So this is a good things and a good chance for us to learn about the different culture from the different nationality. Telling about the pandemic impact, we realized everything have changed, especially for the work style on the land, shipping operation, and also the status environment regulation of each country. So we realized that every country have a good countermeasure for facing this pandemic by applying the regulation. Telling about the support of as a seafarer, we completely support the country by keep a safe operation and safe navigation, deliver the cargo from the one country to another country. This is the effort of a seafarer, every seafarer, for support the country through this pandemic. Telling about the governance, maritime governance, as a seafarer, we completely support the maritime governance and realize that it will be impact to the worldwide. A good improvement for the maritime governments is really means to us. So as a seafarer, we completely support. Let's through this pandemic together by keep up a good performance and a good improvement for the future, especially for the maritime governance and the seafarer. we can support each other. It will be impact to the worldwide. Happy Maritime Days, safe operation and safe navigation everywhere. Thank you.
Céad Míle Fáilte, is Bishop Paul Rocha. My name is Paul Roach and I'm from Cove, County Cork in Ireland. I'm a senior master with P&O Ferries. I work on the North Channel between Northern Ireland and Scotland. I am the senior master. I have a crew of 120 officers and crew, and it's my job to safely transport 250,000 passengers and 2.5 million tonnes of cargo every year into and out of Northern Ireland. My favourite thing about the job is the people. I have 7 different nationalities as crew members on board, and many I count as my friends. It's great to see them. We work together. I've worked with many for decades. With regard to the passengers and the lorry drivers, I know many of the lorry drivers personally because I've been on the route, and it's great fun to interact with them. And during the summer, it's fantastic to see the families on board with their children crossing back and forth as they go on their holidays. The pandemic had a catastrophic effect on the route as many passengers were banned from travelling, and the virus, when it landed originally, we didn't know anything about it. You could have got it from talking to people, from touching surfaces, but the crew carried on. They showed great courage in what was a very frightening situation. So I'm extremely proud of what they did. And what we did is carry on operating between Northern Ireland and Scotland, which was vital for carrying oxygen, medical equipment, hospital personal protective equipment into and out of Northern Ireland. And this is all vital in the fight against COVID. So I'm really proud of my crew that, in spite of all the fear, that they can continue to do their jobs. For many of them, it was very difficult because they were unable to get home. Thank you very much for listening to my speech, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lynette Reed. I'm a proud islander from the Caribbean. This World Maritime Day, I am proud to highlight the island of St. Kitts and Nevis, my second home. St. Kitts and Nevis is a twin island federal state in the Eastern Caribbean and home to approximately 45,000 people. It is also where my mother was raised. Maritime governance is central to the lives of everyone living and visiting this twin island state. Transportation by boat is the main means of getting to and from each island for locals and tourists alike. The trip between Basse-Terre in St. Kitts and Charlestown in Nevis takes about 30 to 45 minutes. Reliable maritime services are key for transporting people, vital goods, and supporting essential services. The ferry system is at the heart of the social fabric of the Twin Island state. I have many memories making that trip as a child to visit family and friends. The system is also key to several economic sectors, such as tourism and agriculture, and generally to maintaining the unity of the Federation. The largest maritime disaster in the history of the island took place August 1st, 1970, when the government-operated ferry, the MV Christina, sank. The passenger capacity was 155, but on that ill-fated afternoon, the Christina had over 300 people on board. Over 200 lives were lost, including my great-aunt. Every year, on the anniversary of the tragedy, the victims and survivors are remembered in a memorial service. The day is commemorated with a ceremony and the throwing of a wreath out at sea where the boat sank. 2020 marked the 50th anniversary of the Christina tragedy. The Honorable Timothy Harris, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, remarked, "The painful tragedy of the MV Christina disaster on August 1st, 1970, gave birth to improved ferry and maritime standards that have ensured such an incident has not been repeated. Today, we are the beneficiaries of such improvements. These include regular inspection of maritime vessels, limits on a number of passengers, provision of life jackets, and certified and experienced operators and crew. Maritime governance is therefore vital for the preservation of lives, livelihoods, and lifestyles in this Caribbean island state. And therefore, it is a prerequisite for the achievement of the 2030 SDG agenda.
Okay, so we're back after watching that video clip from seafarers from the 3 different regions, so giving us basically an insight into how important, obviously, navigation and seafaring is for their, respective realities. I've taken note of 2 questions which have been submitted by participants and addressed to specific panelists. And in fact, I'll start with the first question, which is addressed to Julia from Yudian. And the question is this. So basically, Yudian is asking, how does the UNDP achieve monitoring of good maritime governance in all the countries in the world? And basically, how does it address the issue? How does it address the situation in some countries whereby this good maritime governance is still being ignored and not being implemented yet? Okay, thank you. So, Julia, floor is yours. Feel free to take as much time as possible to answer Yudian.
Thank you so much for that question. And I touched on it briefly in my presentation. I think it's important to stress that UNDP as a UN agency doesn't monitor individual countries on their maritime governance. That's not a task it has taken. However, we, in this project, for example, we find ways to work with countries that see maritime governance as an issue. And that initial interest is a prerequisite for us, for any UN agency, to work with the country and understand better what the issues are, what the underlying governance issues are. And this learning journey that we are developing at the moment will have a high degree of adaptability. So it will allow countries to really zoom in on the issues, understand and zoom in and address the issues that they are facing to improve maritime governance in their context. So UNDP doesn't have even an overall mandate to monitor countries on this specific issue, but it provides technical assistance and capacity development support. And in fact, this Blue Justice community to facilitate coordination and cooperation between countries. So these are all tools to help countries and encourage countries to improve maritime governance. I do want to flag, though, that, and other colleagues can speak more to that, that the AIS Forum has developed the Blue Economy Development Index. And one of the elements of the index is good maritime governance. So there is already, as I understand, data in from the last 2 years from about 10 countries, and I think this year they're aiming for data from 20 countries. So this is an effort to monitor quantitatively the performance on good maritime governance as part of a Blue Economy Development Index. So that's perhaps something to look up. I myself am learning more and more about the methodology. So that's definitely an effort, but that's not UNDP as such. That's the AIS Forum, the organizers of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Now we have a question for Professor Long from Hani, who basically, I'm going to read, verbatim the question. So, Professor Long, you mentioned the need to broaden the issue on ocean resilience and the duty to restore marine environment. How can we relate this ocean resilience issue with the poverty reduction aspect of coastal communities which rely on marine resources? Professor Long, floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, look, Alan, thank you very much. And I was particularly struck during that session by the stories, the seafarers' stories, Lynette, and it's just quite striking to contextualize the discussion today. We're talking about real lives, real people, and indeed the extraordinary challenges. Turning to the question, and if I can share my screen, if this is possible. Yeah, the issue of restoration, climate change, and COVID-19 response measures, and by the way, it's a great issue, the issue of poverty reduction. You can't look at certainly ecological restoration in isolation. And there's certainly in Europe, there are drivers and then there are expected outcomes. And in Europe, a lot of the driving force for ecological restoration, indeed, some of the climate change and COVID-19 response measures are also influenced by Europe's push towards a Green Deal and the implementation of its 2030 biodiversity strategy. So that's a central plank or an externality in relation to restoration. The science of restoration is maturing all of the time, so it's becoming more and more feasible to do this. And of course, this political and economic consideration, I think Ambassador Havas articulates that so well in the context of tsunami, using nature to combat tsunami threats in archipelagic states, including Indonesia. And of course, then there's law and governance considerations, because restoration ocean resilience is already embedded in a lot of regulatory requirements, both at a multilateral or an international level, as well as regional and indeed national level. So in terms of the poverty reduction, I think the outcomes for restoration should be the maintenance and the restoration of biodiversity, and that's a key aspect. I think marine spatial planning and integrated coastal zone management are absolutely two crucial tools in doing that. Also, in terms of adaptation and indeed climate change resilience is enhanced by the strength of our coral reef systems, the strength of the biodiversity in the ocean. And and by the way, we have teams here. There's a team here in the university at the moment working on this, on ecosystems, goods and services, the ecological service values that we can get from restoration. And of course, restoration should promote and be part of blue growth, and that will contribute to poverty reduction. And so one shouldn't associate restoration with a moratorium. A restoration entails a very nuanced or a very sophisticated approach to the management of human impacts on the environment. Bearing in mind, there's quite a lot of initiatives, and I have to compliment the ambassador and his colleagues in the forum for the blue bond initiatives in particular. And it's a very, shall we, inspirational report in the Financial Times last Saturday about how Belize is using blue bonds now to address national debt, and it's negotiating on the back of blue bonds. Seychelles has pioneered this. So archipelagic states can teach the whole world in relation to the financial mechanisms that can be used to support, and again, they can address the poverty issues. And so very happy to share this, and I would hope, right, that the 2030 biodiversity framework, and I know certainly we will be following COP23 very closely. That the oceans community and will be, their voices need to be heard on other multilateral processes, including not only in COP23, but most crucially of all, I suppose, in going forward for the post-2020 biodiversity framework negotiations. So thank you very much for that, and I'm happy to share that. I think ecological restoration in Indonesia has considerable experience on this, both in the terrestrial, the mangroves, and indeed coral reef restoration. So it's about resolving those competing interests. Thank you for that, Alan, and thank you for the question.
Thank you, Professor Long, for your obviously for addressing this so comprehensively. We have now a question submitted for Ambassador Havas, dealing with linking maritime governance and supply chain management. Specifically, the question is the following: maritime governance is very important for supply chain management. How can we make supply chain management more environmental through governance? Ambassador Havas, floor is yours.
Yeah, I think in terms of supply chain, in the context of fisheries, for instance, it should not only be environment, but should also be social responsibility. Should also include human rights. Okay. Let's take the example from my personal experience in getting supply chain for sustainability and legality of timber products, of woods. So you have resources, timber, you are not supposed to cut it down, there is illegal logging. If you want to plant some wood for some industries, okay, it's fine, but you need to be able to prove that the timber that you are using or you are producing or you are selling is socially responsible, following human rights principles, and ecologically responsible. So that you need to be able to trace that to the actual tree, actually, right? And that is a mechanism of certifications. Now, we understand that there are some certifications for sustainability of certain fishery products. You have some sort of compliance within the European Union, for instance, that you have IUU-free products, but I think we need to go beyond that. We need to establish some mechanisms on how we can actually go through, if possible, the date and time of the catch of the products. I work with one small NGO in Indonesia, located in Bali, and this NGO works with farmers in Sulawesi, in Ambon, and in Papua, and with restaurants in Bali. So the restaurant in Bali, I remember in their menu, they serve Abdullah's catch. So what is Abdullah catch? So there is a little QR code of the menu, and you tap the QR code, and then you see that Abdullah is the name of the fisherman who caught the lobster in Maluku in that morning, what time, with a picture of him carrying the lobster, and the lobster is transported from Maluku to Bali using which airplane, arriving at what time, and arriving at the restaurant what time. So you actually know where and when is the lobster that you are eating at that table coming from. So, and it's white lobster, it's not lobster that you actually put some artificial food and stuff. So actually this small project can be replicated. So I think with the technology, I think you can use that. With the application, you can use that. So maybe the Archipelagic and Island State Secretariat with UNDP can come up with some idea, with some competitions to create a certification system use the technology so that we are sure that the fish that we consume actually comes from a certain location at certain time by certain farmers. It's possible in coffee industry, we have done that. It's possible in the forestry, and I think it's possible in the fishery industry as well. So yeah, the questions is written with challenge. Thanks.
Thanks, Ambassador. And if I may add, I think it's been done for chocolate as well. So responsible chocolate.
Yes. Yeah.
So, okay, I'm sorry I referred to chocolate, but it's almost lunchtime here in Malta, so probably, and it's probably dinner time, could be dinner time in Indonesia. So I think we're approaching slowly the end of the webinar. So I think, food is never far away from our thoughts. I'll start one last roundtable. So with a question for each of our panelists, and if we have time towards the end, one general question for all of you. So I'll start once again with Julia, and I have this particular question for you. So will the Blue Justice Initiative help AIS countries having less means in tackling these often resource-intensive transnational crime issues? I think, this is quite a fundamental question, since unfortunately, as often happens, not all countries are, on an equal footing when it comes to resources to tackling, these common issues that we've been addressing and speaking about today. So, floor is yours.
Thanks, Alan. And yes, it does. I think what's fair to say is that the the Blue Justice Initiative that Norway has kickstarted a few years ago, but now includes 39 countries and growing. Is both a political initiative and provides programmatic support. So the programmatic support that you're touching on is provided through a number of projects. One of the projects I mentioned, the Blue Resilience Project that UNDP implements, but there are others, the Blue Enforcement Project, the Blue Fairness Project with other UN agencies. I will send through the link of the Blue Justice Initiative in the chat in a moment, so everybody can have a look. It's definitely meant to provide support to actually not to ocean states, right? Not only to archipelagic and small island states, but also to large ocean nations. And that comes in the form, in different forms in the different projects. In the Blue Resilience Project that I know best, it comes in the form of the learning journey that we're developing. So that is a capacity development offer that countries can use and will be supported on using. There's also technical support. For example, the Blue Justice community that I mentioned, this secure online platform, allows countries that have signed up to the platform and government officials to, for example, connect with a tracking center here in the north of Norway, or the actually middle or north of Norway, which provides satellite imagery. So what countries can do is to ask for certain images and also for advice, for technical advice from the analysts in that center to interpret the satellite imagery. So that's something that a lot of individual countries cannot afford to have by themselves, this kind of tracking system. And this is, for example, to track individual vessels or activity going on in a certain area in their country. So in that sense, the community and the Blue Justice Initiative provides these technical means that individual countries might not have and shares these resources between the countries. So it's a big yes.
Very good. Thank you, Julia, for that positive, feedback. And yes, technology is one of the ways, obviously, that countries which, do not have all the necessary facilities to obviously combat the infringements happening out at sea, You know, it's one of the ways that countries can, all countries can be on roughly the same footing. You know, so yes, I fully agree with you. I will revert once again to Professor Long for the next question, before then making the final question to Ambassador Havas. So Professor Long, only yesterday, the EU Commission launched a series of missions. A series of missions whose target date or delivery date is 2030. I'm putting on the regional hat, so speaking a bit about Europe, but I think it's an interesting update for people joining us and following us from outside Europe. Since this model that the European Commission is actually has actually chosen, the missions, might be interesting for other regions as well. So we have 5 missions which have been launched by the European Commission, and one of these 5 missions refers to healthy seas. So, and then there's cancer, there's urban mobility, there's food production, and there's climate change. So the EU has actually dedicated one of its 5 missions to the ocean, and has already allocated 500 million euros for the implementation of this mission for the first 3 years. So a lot of money is going for these missions. Do you, since you've been involved in European funded projects, and even at the European Commission and so on, it's quite an open-ended question, mine. How confident are you that these missions, and in particular the ocean mission, and I've been on the mission board for the ocean mission myself, how confident, because this is $1 million question, how confident are you that
look, firstly, in terms of the 5 priorities, this was hugely important to have oceans in there, and it's on resilience. It's been given in terms of the Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe programs. It's been given the same priority as the fight against cancer, for example. So for me, this is very important, and the reason goes directly to archipelagic states and small island states across the world, whether they're archipelagic states or not, is that most of the damage to the fabric, the environmental fabric, has been done from carbon-intensive economies such as we have here in Europe. It is wrong to ask a fisherman in Bali or somebody in St. Kitts and Nevis to bear the burden of restoration and resilience. So there has to be a debt swap for me on the back of resilience to fund those coral reef restorations or to fund the seagrass restoration. And this is crucially important now because small island developing states have borrowed as much as everybody else to respond to the COVID-19. So indebtedness is very high already for developing states right across the world. And there's the accumulator effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, in terms of writing off that debt, I think environmental restoration, coral reef restoration in particular, and the burden of poor nations having to protect the natural world shouldn't be borne exclusively by archipelagic states or indeed island states across the world. And I think that the restoration resilience way, and by the way, there are mechanisms there for certainly for companies under their ESM, and Belize, as I've said previously, is pioneering this currently. So for me, the experience in Europe is great, and it's very important that the resilience achieved that target within the missions program. And I suppose the notion of the missions has its history in, shall we say, the NASA missions of going to the moon and everything that was followed in that, technical innovation in the United States. And certainly the ambassador would have remembered from his time in Harvard, MIT and all that kind of ecosystem industrial clusters came out of the mission programs. So the European mission programs are to design that kind of drive from innovation. But for me, there has to be a clear link with the resilience and the burden shared by the Global South and archipelagic and island states in particular. For example, I can recall from reading last weekend that maybe 1 in 10 workers works in the fisheries sector in Belize. 40% of GDP, as reported in the FT last Saturday, comes from ocean resources. And so, you know, it goes directly to that fantastic question we had from Bali was, well, you know, restoration is good, but who's going to pay? And should it be the local fisher, or should it be the global community and those causing the damage? I'll leave it at that. And I would urge people to look on the mission website, and because the website is quite inspirational in the European Commission. And we will be looking to work on these resilience and restoration projects here at the university in due course. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Long. You know, for linking up, managing to linking up what is essentially a European initiative with what's happening as well, you know, on the global scene as well. I now pass on to Ambassador Havas, you know, which through a question which makes reference to the first presentation, to the presentation made by Ambassador Havas later on. So, Ambassador, in your recommendations for future steps, for the next steps, you mentioned several international bodies within which AIS countries should put forward their common position on maritime governance. Couldn't it be the case that one could argue that we have done enough already, that perhaps there's too much talking, you know, position taking, as has happened in the past, and not enough action? Is voluntary reporting working? And finally, can the solutions we actually need, could these be found at this level? I know it's quite a tall order, but I think these are very pertinent questions, which, you know, we need to seek answers for. So over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a very easy question to answer. You know, that question has come to my mind myself. We have done a lot individually, yeah, but the result is not what we expect. Yeah, we actually have done our own voluntary report on the Paris Agreement, which started to be filled in with ocean, but not as much as what we could do. Similarly, with the issue of fishery subsidy in WTO, right? But then the question would be, what else can we do? We cannot start the revolutions. We are up against you know, very difficult and sometimes frustrating situation. I'll give you an example. 2015, I was in Paris. Okay, I was part of the delegations, and I was asked to lobby on behalf of a number of interests in Indonesia in terms of how we can include ocean in Paris Agreement. Okay. My own colleague, to be frank, within the different ministries, they are foresters, they are terrestrials. They don't understand what ocean is all about, and they don't want to know about it, okay? And even within Indonesian delegation, we have problems trying to convince each other. And Paris arrived, we were there, and if any of you were in Paris in 2015, we were given by the French government a place to meet far, far away from the main building of negotiations, because the French government did not want to include ocean because it's going to be more complicated, it's going to be difficult. They want to have the deal done in Paris, right? So there we go. We were given a hall that can sit, I think, 3,000 people, and there were only 100 people of us. So even the assignment of the hall, actually, it was designed as such to show that the ocean people are small in number, as opposed to the space that is so big. But we did not stop, within the government. Now in Indonesia itself, we have one voice of the importance of the oceans within the Ministry of Forestry, even. The fact that the colleague in the Ministry of Forestry is now willing to work with many different colleagues in the mangrove. And mangrove is gray area. Is it ocean? Is it sea? Is it us, forester? Even in national level, you can easily have a debate that this is not your mandate. This is my mandate. This is forestry. This is not fishery. This is not the Ministry of Fishery. So this is mentioned by Julia earlier on, the interagency frustrations. We had that. So we have to work together on that issue. And now we have already some discussions within the UNFCCC of an ocean issue. We have a Blue COP. We have a number of new initiatives coming up. The Blue Justice is one of them. It was not there. It's coming out of the frustration, if you will, of the many oceanic countries that we are not taken care of seriously in the climate change discussion. Now Glasgow is much more open to the oceans. So frustrating, yes. Give up? I don't think so. So the tools, I think, is that sharing of information through documents that countries are willing to share, because there is no other way. There is no other way for us. If we want to ask something like Ronan mentioned, that is the developed country who should pay, or should, that is the very harsh word, but that's the idea, right? Then we have to also be able to convince ourselves and convince our group that we have done a lot. This is the evidence, okay? This is the evidence that we've done a lot. This is the evidence that you guys are not doing enough. And that's where we can start a very strong movement. And so far, we have not been successful in WTO. We can ask Trump to disband WTO, but even Trump was not successful. So it's organizations that's there. We are party to it, and I don't see any other way. I think I know it's frustrating, but so far that is the only way. Very slow. But look at the experience of mainstreaming ocean in Paris climate discussion. It took us from 2015 to 2020, 2021, so 5-6 years. But we are there. We are not there as we would like to. What we like is to change the wording in Paris Agreement to put ocean there. But people told me, that's impossible. Okay, we can do whatever we can, as much as we can, as hard as we can. So yeah. I think this forum is a great forum for us to work together to bring about what we believe it's our interest and our right as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I fully concur that the ocean is slowly making it to the top table finally, after. Because, as you rightly said, at the Paris event, at the Paris COP 6 years ago, the ocean was restricted to just a side event, So there was a side event, so that was the only way the ocean was mentioned. And we're just 1 year and 9 months away from the official start of seabed mining. So last June, we've had Nauru, which has basically submitted, its a statement to basically show its intent to start seabed mining in 2 years' time on behalf of a multinational company. So, we just have 1 year and 9 months to define the rule book, as we say, for seabed mining, for example, which is just one of the many potential stressors and threats to the integrity of our seas. So the challenges are indeed massive, and it's indeed time to obviously, give the ocean the space that it so deserves at the top table. So we'll just have 4 minutes on the clock. So I wanted to perhaps conclude this with a final question to the panel. So anybody, can feel free to interject and to contribute to this, So we've touched upon many thematics today, not just, strict ocean governance in the strict sense, but I think we didn't touch upon perhaps as much as we wanted on one particular one. So here's this question I wanted to field: how can maritime governance empower women to take up roles within the blue economy? Blue economy is a wonderful opportunity to try to, empower more and more women to take up, roles, important roles, and not just employment, but important roles as well in decision making. How can maritime governance actually empower women to achieve this? So, floor is yours. Whoever feels, wants to contribute. So yes, Ronan.
Yeah, look, it's what a great question to finish on, Alan. And it's, the Law of the Sea Convention and indeed the associated agreements are essentially men's law for men. And so they're not gender specific, and they're kind of reflective. They're reflective of a certain era. I think a huge issue going forward, and I know certainly the negotiators and diplomats that are in on the forum this afternoon, is to make sure we have very gender-specific provisions in the draft BBNJ agreement, and gender-specific provisions in IMO instruments, as well as gender-sensitive provisions, so that we set down a very regulatory requirement. The second issue, I think, is to make sure that we're monitoring and we have baseline data for designing strategies, and then we have to have family responsive policies. It's just crucially important in all aspects of life. And mentorship is very important in terms of bringing women on through their careers. And then there has to be absolutely not only individual responsibility, but institutional responsibility, and then a governmental or intergovernmental responsibility on the equality agenda. We have a big report on this, Empowering Women for the Decade of Ocean Science, which we're more than happy to share with everybody. And I think Jill posted the link there. So, Alan, thank you for the question. It goes very hard to the heart of the mission of the university. And we have a brilliant woman leader in Dr. Cleopatra Jumbia Henry. So thank you.
Thank you, Ronan. I don't know if Ambassador Havas or Julia want to contribute.
Ambassador, you want to go first?
Yeah, because I have to go in a minute. So 42% of coastal workers in terms of fisheries in Indonesia is women. Okay, so by default, it's a very large proportions in terms of our own situations. Yet they are not properly protected. Okay, the law, of course, is non-gender specific. Yeah, but in terms of actual implementation, that is not exactly what happened. So I think the government of Indonesia have done a number of projects. For instance, small-scale loans are given only to women in terms of the coastal workers, fishery workers at the coast. We have provided now protections of the family and the wives of the fishermen with insurance, and we also provide insurance as well for the small-scale fishermen. So we started to see the importance, of the women in the context of the blue economy. But blue economy is not only fisheries. It involves a different aspect, and I think this is still some of the blind spot that many different areas in the governance are still lacking. We believe that the contributions, of women in the reduction of poverty in the blue economy sector, in the fishery sector, are very, very strong. And we also believe that in the tourism sector, so in the coastal tourism, is also very, very strong. So I think this is one of the issues that is also important, as I mentioned before, in terms of exchanging experience. I'm not so sure whether each of us in the ICE platform knows what the other country actually is doing, in terms of their policy in protecting and providing facilitation for women in the blue economy or the fishery sector. So this is one of the aspects that I believe is a good platform of discussion within the ICE itself. So I think gender aspect in the ocean governance for the many different countries are indeed a very important topic. We have to look at it even more closer. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Julia?
Alan, just to wrap up, it couldn't be a better question for me, because I'm also doing some research on the gender aspects of on gender women participation in the maritime. And what we've done, and what we're in the process of doing, is to map the issues around in a systems thinking way, around like an iceberg, like I showed the one earlier as well. And it's interesting to see that the issues are from top to bottom. You have issues, practical issues, sort of patterns, where you see that women have trouble accessing education and training in the maritime. Then as policies around family planning, but then it goes deeper down into sort of the mental models and of the sector, where there's lots of prejudice against women's abilities and the culture of masculinity, sometimes cultural norms. So some of this is state responsibilities, right? And some of it is also private sector responsibility. And I guess we always come into this chicken and egg situation. Where do you start? Do you start with regulation, encouraging the private sector to take on certain responsibilities and change behaviors? Or the other way around? Do you wait for that and build like a good baseline and good practice from the private sector? So I think there's lots to do, and there's definitely a maritime governance issue here at national, regional, but also at global level. And it relates to also all the UN agencies, including the ILO, the IMO, and so on. So yes, lots to discuss. We can have another webinar on this maybe. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Professor Long. We have to wrap it up. Ambassador needs to leave. We are 4 minutes above time. We're on time. Thank you to the IAS Forum for setting this up, for really being the beacon, and the champion for all those who don't have a voice. There's so much, as Julia said, we could say more about this, and I look forward to the next AIS forum activity so that I can contribute through my, through any means possible to achieving these noble goals. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for following and for participating. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you.
The Archipelagic and Island States Forum is a platform designed to facilitate 47 archipelagic and island nations to collaborate and cooperate in addressing common challenges in 4 thematic areas: climate change mitigation and adaptation, blue economy, marine plastic debris, and good maritime governance. In 2017, the idea to establish the multinational cooperation framework among the archipelagic and island states was first iterated during the UN Ocean Conference in New York. In November 2018, Indonesia hosted the first ministerial meeting with 21 archipelagic and island states. The Archipelagic and Island States Forum was established by Manando Joint Declaration. In the following year, the second ministerial meeting adopted the final outcome, with 25 AIS participating countries. To achieve our vision, we focus on 4 objectives, which we translate into our programs. Create an open, innovative, and engaging forum. Provide a space to share and implement innovative and tangible programs. Promote collaborative efforts among stakeholders. And create opportunity through the blue economy. Ideation, implementation, and evaluation are the core elements to our solution framework in addressing the problems. In 2020, AIS Forum launched programs to drive innovation, which are AIS Joint Research, a collaborative applied research program affiliated with academic institutions in AIS countries with various topics related to the 4 areas of collaboration. The Innovator Scholarship Program, a fully funded exchange program for talented individuals from AIS participating countries who can demonstrate exceptional leadership quality and creative mind, and AIS Innovation Challenge, to find innovative ideas and breakthroughs that can help societies and businesses to be more resilient and adaptive during crisis situations. AIS Forum also launched AIS Blue Startup Hub, a platform to connect marine-focused startup in 47 archipelagic and island states across the globe. AIS Blue Startup Hub Mentoring Program was launched with 18 participating startups from 6 countries. As an effort to realize the smart, innovative solutions, AIS Forum also engaged with public audiences through online events in a form of trainings, workshops, talk shows, and discussions with various topics and stakeholders across AIS participating countries. In light of COVID-19 pandemic, it is important for archipelagic and island states to have a resilient economy. Therefore, AIS Forum Secretariat introduces programs which focuses on blue economy. As a form of its commitment, AIS Forum developed Blue Economy Development Index, or BEDI. This index will be used as a tracking tool to determine the current use of coastal and marine resources, and it can be used as a tool to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. Blue Financing Framework, or BFF, which provides a guidance for governments, financial institutions, philanthropists, and donors to align their investments with the blue economy principles and allow them to select a project to be financed in the blue economy sectors. Smart and innovative solution programs, such as sharing knowledge sessions with experts and representatives from AIS participating countries. Plankton, which was a competition to raise awareness in reducing marine plastic debris. Impact pitching, which connects startups, small and medium-sized enterprises, potential investors, and growth enablers to gain partnership. And Ending Plastic Pollution Innovation Challenge, which was a collaboration with Marine Plastic Debris Project from UNDP Indonesia to address marine plastic pollution in Southeast Asia. Many solutions to challenges that affect AIS participating countries in 4 main thematic areas and SDG 14 goals are produced through collaboration programs. These programs will explore opportunities through innovation and experiment that benefits on a local, regional, and international scale through sharing knowledge and experiences between AIS participating countries.